put a specific need, vegetarian, gluten-free, any other restrictions, know that there are items for you, and please take advantage of that. We want to make sure that everyone's fed and feeling good when we get started, since we're going to be here for a couple of hours. We're just going to get going in 1 minute, so grab your last snacks before we get started, and then we'll dive in. Thanks.
You're so good. In case you can't read this, I added, so these are the senators that are actually in the room. We're accepting him. Actually, Lori's not here. Will Steinberg, President Owner, is you're going to present this. Gilkey is here, Superintendent Montana is here. She's not here yet.
That's what it's 42. Yes.
We have something to give to.
Isn't it?
Okay, all right. Okay. You guys handle it.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you
That
have it.
happens. The president will come up and Hannah will come up to the PBS because he just has been on.
Yeah, so Hannah has remarks to actually present it, so he's welcome.
So that I would tell her.
Yeah, that's fine. We're missing a couple, but yeah, I would say they're like almost all here. Yeah. Grab as many President Dallas.
Not at this time. No, we're going to take a picture. The senators.
You should be in the middle. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Ay, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Seguro que nos vamos a empezar. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, we miss Senator Cohen. We miss Senator Cohen. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. And welcome to the 10th Annual Senate Education Summit. My name is Sandra Cano. I'm the Chair of Education here in the Senate. And I just want to say I'm very thankful for being here today. And before I share some remarks about our purpose for the day, I'd like to invite Rhode Island College President Jack Warner to the podium. Rick has been such a gracious host to the Senate both for the summit today and for the entire Senate during the pandemic. And I'm so glad to be hosting our summit at this time at this institution. And I just want to also give a shout out to Ana Cano Morales that is here, has no relationship with me, other than we share the same last name, but she really was the person that was responsible for arranging all these. And thank you so much for always being open and willing to do everything with us in the Senate. At this time, please welcome President Warner to the podium. President.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is our honor and privilege to be hosting an event like this. As you may know, we hosted a rather big event yesterday. Some of you were there. I've offered residence hall rooms on campus in case anybody needs to stay over for the next one. But we are very pleased and privileged to be hosting events like these. These are really important. And the theme for today's meeting, the mental health of kids in schools, you should know is something that we share. We share the issue here at Rhode Island College, where we've seen some significant increases over a very robust base of students in need of counseling here too. So the mental health issues and the mental care of our students at all levels is really such an important issue of today. So let me recognize a few people. President Dominic Ruggiero is here. Majority Whip Mary Ellen Goodwin. Is she here yet? She's scheduled to, okay, she is on her way. Senator Sandra Cano, thank you for your leadership. In my history here in Rhode Island, I was commissioner for a while back in the day, and I always had a wonderful reception at Senate Education. So thanks to you and to Senator Hannah Gallo, Vice Chair of Senate Education, who was chair back in the day. Senator Cynthia Coyne is here. Cynthia. Senator Valerie Lawson. Senator Elena DiMario. Senator Melissa Murray, who's also on Senate Finance. Okay. Senator Megan Coleman. Senator Bridget Valverde. Well, thank you all for attending. I'd also like to shout out Commissioner Shannon Gilkey, Commissioner of Post-Secondary, and I believe Commissioner Angelica Infante Green is also planning to attend, may not be here just yet. We also have Providence Superintendent Montañez here. Leo, welcome. We have much to talk about. All right. I want to shout out Neil Steinberg, who is here, CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation. And DCYF Director Kevin Ockheim is here. Welcome. Welcome, Director. And I also want to recognize, and I have a little something for her, Elizabeth Burke Bryant. You were a leader back in the day when I was commissioner, and you are a leader today, but I understand you've decided to step down from your leadership role as Executive Director of Kids Count. So please come up and a little Rhode Island College flag, a little button, which, oh, sorry, clashes with your outfit. So, again, thank you. We are honored to be hosting this meeting today. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, President. It's so great to start the remarks by recognizing the people that makes this possible. and that is going to be doing the work after we finish our summit today. So that is a good invitation for you to pay attention to who was in the room that is a decision maker, because we're going to do this all together. But I wanna, again, welcome you to the 10th Annual Rhode Island Education Summit, and it's such an honor to be here with so many of our state educators, leaders, and really, we rely on your experience, your voices, to guide us as leaders and policymakers at the State House. As we're deeply grateful for the work that you do every day to help our children learn, grow, and thrive. Our theme this year centers on an incredibly important issue: mental and behavioral health in our schools, and the support our children and educators need. This issue is not new, but it has never been more urgent. As pediatricians, mental health professionals, and hospitals declared early this year, this is a crisis and an emergency. Even prior to the pandemic, the mental and emotional health of our students stood out as an area of concern. In 2021, Rhode Island Youth Risk Behavior Survey, greater than 1 in 3 high school students reporting feeling sad or hopeless for more than 2 weeks during the previous year. Recent years have seen extremely troubling increases in anxiety as well as suicide attempts among children. That's very concerning and sad. The losses and disruptions from COVID have only intensified these trends. Not only have our children faced new, unprecedented obstacles in their academic development, they have experienced enormous personal and social challenges. Far too many have experienced the kind of trauma that can put them at risk for mental health and physical health, and problems like the loss of a loved one or isolation from peers. Our children have watched horrific gun violence play out in classrooms across the country. And far too many have personally experienced bullying and abuse even at home. We know too that these impacts have been disproportionately felt among children who already experience other risk factors to their health and well-being. Every child in Rhode Island deserves the best possible chance for success in the schools and in life. And right now, we are falling short of our responsibility to provide that. So we must provide our students with more mental and behavioral health supports and guaranteeing access to the trained professionals who can meet these needs, like counselors, social workers, and that must be a top priority. And we must be able to provide screening and services not only to our children in public K-12 schools, but all the way from early childhood education to adulthood. That's why I think it's important to have our commissioner here for post-secondary education and our commissioner, Infante Green, that is planning to come. We know that it's essential for educators too, because your ability to be effective and your own well-being is also at stake. I'm proud that in the most recent session at the State House, we took some important steps towards addressing this crisis. The Trauma-Informed School Act, which was signed into law in June, represents a critical starting point as we work to ensure Rhode Island meets the academic, behavioral, social, and emotional needs of our children. And that stands to a coalition of advocates that are here in the room. So let's just give them a round of applause, because that's the beginning. It will help create new strategies to address the situation we face, and it will help support and train or adults in school settings to recognize the effects of trauma in our children. I really want to thank my friend, Representative Marcia Rangley Basso, who was the real force behind our bill on trauma-informed schools, along with the coalition. So much more needs to be done, and that's a big part of why we're here today. My colleagues in government and I want to hear from you, our educators, leaders, and what we can do to help. And by the way, we make sure that parents are here, we make sure the youth is here, that the voices of Rhode Islanders really get together to get comprehensive legislation that could be part of the change. I'd like to take this moment to recognize my colleagues in the room. I know that President Warner have already mentioned them, but it's important for me to just recognize them again. President Ruggiero, thank you for your advocacy and being a leader in our Senate that really listens to education priorities. Thank you so much. Senator Lawson, Senator Cohen, Maury, Balbetti, DiMario, and most importantly, my mentor, Senator Gallo, which is a true champion in education. But we also heard from President that there is some leaders that really have been outspoken about these issues. So Neil from the Rhode Island Foundation, thank you so much for being here, as well as the commissioner and the superintendent. I think that together really with the educators and the parents, we can do this work. We want to hear from you about where the system is working and where it's not. We want to know the challenges that you, your peers, and your students face every day and how they can be addressed. This is just the start of what will be many months of work ahead, and I urge you all to share your best thinking both today and in the weeks to come. Following today's presentation, we will send all of you, again, a survey to capture ideas, recommendations, and your interest in continuing to work with us to develop policies and solutions. I look forward to the rest of today's program, and thank you again for being part of it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, a true champion for education, my mentor and friend, Senator Hannah Gallo, that is going to welcome you all. And again, this was her summit, so I'm just kind of continue her legacy. So let's welcome him.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Kano. Sorry, I can't even get this to go over here. Hold on. I dropped somebody's glasses. Sorry. I want to thank you all for joining us today for this Education Summit. 10 years, can you imagine? I'm not going to point out people, it's all of you together. You know what really makes me happy? We had to get a bigger room so that we could accommodate everybody. It doesn't get better than this. And I love that we have from like students to commissioners that have been here. We have so much brain power here, and I feel empowered. I feel like we can do it when we're together. And I just want to say thank you for all taking time out of your day, for being here and sharing on what we consider to be important, because it takes all of us in this room and everywhere in the state to make these things happen. As Sandra said, this gathering is always extremely valuable for us in the Senate. It's an opportunity for all of us here to share our ideas, learn from one another, and to build connections that benefit education here in Rhode Island. This kind of communication and collaboration is so essential. We can take on big challenges. We face them all together. The friendships that we can make while we're here, the connections, it all helps. We realize what we need for our legislation. You realize that your voice is important and that we're listening. We need you. We need your input. There are so many aspects of this crisis and so much that we need to learn. So this pandemic, it didn't just, it had its effect on so many, but I see it being in the schools. There are so many children that have it was so negative, and nobody really thinks about it. It was like, oh, it was like this little timeout. It was more than that. I share an office, the inner office, you go through my office to get to the social workers. It's a constant all day. It's one child after another after another. And unless you're there and you see it in the building, you can't imagine what it's like. And it's so sad to see that children, they're not able to learn. Anyways, I think that it's clear, however, that addressing this crisis and building our educational future requires a truly holistic approach. One of the issues I've been most passionate about and proudest of in the last few years has been the work on investing into our schools. The state school buildings have been in disrepair, and it's disrespectful the way they are right now. And I think unless you've actually spent a day in a school building and experienced it being freezing cold or leaking, moldy, 90-something degrees during the day, people who are in the business community, they can't even fathom that, like, what the working conditions are for. And not just adults, their children, the same thing. They've got their little pink faces with their coats on them. It's just not right. So I've been passionate about it. Our students and our teachers deserve the best resources and support that we can possibly provide them. But for far too long, we have asked our children and our teachers to embrace the 21st century approach to learning, but the buildings and the classrooms that are very much products of the 20th century. And the time has come for so many of our schools, now ailing and aging, after decades of service, to be renovated or replaced. At the core of this need is the need of every child and every educator to have an environment that is dry, warm, and safe. Investing in the 21st century school buildings has already produced incredible results, including Eden Park Elementary School in my city of Cranston. Garden City School is being worked on right now, and there's so many. I'm sure many of you have toured Barrington High School. It is just so wonderful to see the progress that we're making. And I seem like I'm diverting that way, but it's just as important for our children to know that they're valued. And I'm deeply grateful that we are pursuing a new statewide bond this year to continue the progress that we've made. And I just want to put a word out there. Thank you, Seth Magaziner, for being a partner and always being there with us and making it a priority. He has always helped, and it's been a pleasure to work alongside him. What really makes the school special is the people within it, not just the building itself, which is why we must do more to build healthy and safe communities within our buildings. And in the same way that the state has rallied around school buildings and their upgrades, it's time to make renewed effort to care for the well-being of students, educators, and the staff in every school building in Rhode Island. Like rebuilding our aging schools, addressing the crisis we face in mental and behavioral health is another extraordinary challenge. But through collaboration and shared commitment, it is one that I know that we can positively meet. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. She is a tireless supporter of Rhode Island's children and at the State House. We've relied on her expertise again and again. She has been a driving force behind all-day kindergarten, pre-K expansion, investments in childcare, and so much more. As she prepares to step down as Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count, after nearly 3 decades, she leaves an incredible legacy of advocacy on behalf of the state's children and their family. Please join me in welcoming my friend, my mentor, because she dragged me into that preschool, into the kindergarten. I always wanted it, but like she put me in there. We went deep in and we made, so kindergarten has happened full day. Now we're going for the preschool. There's no stopping us. We're going to get the mental health all set away. I can't imagine doing it without you, but I know that you do have some very good people at Kids Count. Big shoes to fill, however. Elizabeth Burke Bryant, please.
Thank you so much, Senator Gallo and Senator Cano. I appreciate so much having been invited to give a brief keynote. I'm looking at Nora. Unless it's changed, I'm going to give a 10-minute set the stage and then get some comments from the audience.
Hours if you want to, Elizabeth.
Well, that was the plan anyway, so that's what I'm going to dive into. But it's so great to see the Senate President and so many other senators that we work with day in and day out and night in and night out. I'm also so pleased that a few members of our Kids Count staff are here. One you'll be hearing from, Caitlin Rabb, is going to be giving a great wave to everyone. She's going to be giving you highlights from the children's mental health issue brief that we just released this week. And so I know you'll learn so much from Caitlin. And she co-authored the brief with Kelsey Bala from our team. And also with us is, where's Kelsey? Kelsey, there you are. Wave. And Paige Closhus Parks, our senior policy analyst for education. And what a fan club over there. And also Leanne Barrett was hoping to stop in, but she might not be here, but I know she has worked so tirelessly with all of you through the Right From the Start campaign. And all of our team at Rhode Island Kids Count just is so excited to be in the trenches with so many people around the community that are here today, including an amazing showing from Young Voices Youth. Wave. And it's so great to see so many partners like Ramona Santos Torres from Queen, Peter Chung, you should wave for Young Voices too. Marcella Bettencourt from the Latino Policy Institute. And there's just so many partners, I can't keep rolling, but we just so value the voice of youth. This is their lives that we're talking about. And I just get overcome with emotion when I hear students come to the State House and very bravely tell you what their lives are like in school and out of school. They are the face of this mental health emergency. So I just want us all to remember that as we're doing any kind of policy work, the voices of those with lived experience that are most on the front line of this major crisis facing our state and our nation are our young people, our parents. They are the ones that can really best inform this work. So I just want to start with just a statistic and then go into a few highlights of areas we'll probably cover in this important summit. It's now oft-cited that unfortunately 1 in 5, or 19% of children ages 6 to 17, has a diagnosable mental health problem, and 1 in 10 has a significant functional impairment. In 2021, Rhode Island high school students reported by a margin of 4 out of 5 saying that they did not get the help they needed when feeling anxious or depressed. And that was significantly down from that response in 2019. Calls to the Kids Link hotline, which is the 24/7 hotline that can be called by parents and others in order to try to line up appropriate care for their kids, doubled from 4,800 calls in FY 2019 to 9,700 calls in FY 2021. And now we're seeing, because we keep getting the latest data, and I'm stealing Caitlin's thunder on this and one other thing, but we're just seeing that they're starting to come down a little bit, but they're still well above the pre-pandemic levels. So that's great, reliable, here and now data that can really be putting the punctuation mark on the fact that we have a crisis. So in April of 2022, a state of emergency in children's mental health was declared by the Rhode Island chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Rhode Island Council of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Hasbro Children's Hospital, and Bradley Hospital. And they made these recommendations on how to address this issue in Rhode Island. First, increase state funding, including Medicaid rates, for evidence-based mental health screening, diagnosis, and treatment. Second, fully fund and prioritize comprehensive community-based systems of care. Third, accelerate strategies to address longstanding workforce challenges. And everyone out there knows what a crisis the workforce is in Health and Human Services. Fortunately, the General Assembly did pass the rate setting and rate review of Medicaid rates, which was a really important move in the last session, so that our rates don't keep falling behind. Fourth, and this is what the central topic today is, support effective models of combining school-based mental health care with clinical strategies. So therefore, that it's not school-based mental health in a silo with no connections to community-based mental health services. If that level of care is needed, it needs to be seamless, and it really needs to be coordinated. Next, support models of integrating mental health care into primary pediatric care settings. It just makes common sense. The head is part of the body. The brain is part of the body. There comes my Providence accent right out there. The brain is part of the body, and we need holistic approaches in pediatric practices, whether they are at our health centers, which have been ahead of the curve in terms of integrating mental health into primary care, as well as in all of our private pediatric settings. And PCMH Kids, a medical home model for kids, has been a good example of the outcomes that improve if you truly have on-site psychiatric help right at a pediatrician's office. And finally, address the acute care mental health needs of children and youth. I just want to harken back to something that Senator Cano said, which is so important, which is while this Senate Education Summit this year is about behavioral health in schools, as Senator Cano said, and the General Assembly knows, including our Senate President, Dominic Ruggiero, we must start in the early years, because early childhood mental wellness is the foundation for future development and necessary for infants and young children to experience and regulate emotions from close, secure interpersonal relationships and explore the environment and learn in the context of their family, community, and culture. Infants who don't develop secure attachments are at risks for learning delays, difficulty expressing emotions, and future mental health disorders. So all that to say that your work to improve paid family leave so that their parents have the opportunity for true bonding and a magnificent liftoff as parents with their new babies, whether they be biological or adopted children, that is so important, as is really addressing the needs, continuing to address the needs of childcare so that we don't have the constant turnover of low compensated childcare educators who then are leaving jobs that they love because they can go someplace down the street and make much more money. And then kids just don't have the consistency of caregivers. I can't even imagine what that would be like. And that is something that the Senate has really, really been focusing on. You've increased rates each year, and hopefully there's more to come. The Right from the Start campaign that many of you have been involved in are really focusing on federal benchmarks for child care rates. You've also focused on early intervention with a very, very important increase in rates last year in the face of about 600 young children on waiting lists for early intervention, which is a right for children and their families. And also, you have been focusing on Head Start and pre-K and all that matters in the younger years. And I really salute Senator Gallo for her long, long time efforts in this early childhood arena. So what do we need to do in addition to the FIRM Foundation, the very important Early Childhood Foundation? We need to go to where the kids are, and the kids are in school. So I want to just salute, and we've heard this from a few people, the passage of the Trauma-Informed Cares Act, the Trauma-Informed Care Act, which will require that every person in every school building in Rhode Island's public schools, from the cafeteria staff to the assistant principal to the history teacher and everybody in between, are trained on trauma-informed care, so that in school buildings, they can be on the lookout for behavior that is very related to trauma. It's not acting out or misbehavior completely divorced from any context with trauma. It's often caused by trauma. And so really elevating the training of all people in school buildings that come into touch with children during the day is really a major step forward. And that bill was thanks to Senator Cano and also Senator Ranglin Vassell. And I see Darlene Allen was hugely important to that as well. Before I forget, I also wanted to say thank you to Senator DiMario for the passage in the Senate, and it was passed in the House, of the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Wellness Bill. So there were a lot of key things that we can build on from last year. So as we look to the Trauma-Informed Schools Act, I really want to share something with you that I think we need to pay attention to, which is we think about, there's all kinds of traumas. There's traumas from early childhood, there's traumas from difficulties in families, there's traumas from a whole variety of different places that affect children as they're making their way to school and that need to be recognized. My colleague, Paige Closhas-Parks, told me about an anthology of essays, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience. It's a compilation of essays edited by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. If you want to know why trauma-informed schools and access to mental health behavioral supports for children of color is an equity issue and a responsibility of policymakers, the quote from this essay by Prentice Hemphill, former Healing Justice Director at Black Lives Matter Global Network, says it all. And I quote, Black trauma is a concentration of generations of these experiences that overwhelm not only the individual, but the community, enforced and enacted through policies that have displaced us and criminalized our cultural practices that help us heal. It is also the trauma of systemic denial of resources or stability needed to address the pain and aftershocks of massive collective trauma and aftershocks of daily assaults and indignities. As Hemphill states, healing Black trauma is one of the most worthwhile endeavors we can all undertake. This is the work of recovering Black possibility, creativity, and futures. And we know that the impact of the pandemic, as was stated before, was so disproportionately felt by the Latino community and the Black community, the Indigenous community. People of color had it worse every which way you look at it, from the numbers who got the illness, who died from it, job loss during the pandemic, disruption of economic situations, housing issues. This is something that we really have to pay attention to if we are truly going to be talking about what are we going to do post-pandemic. We really need to look at those inequities and really address this in an equitable way. So the last few things, I just wanted to say, sometimes I used to always say, you don't want to be an advocate where everyone who sees you coming crosses the street because they say, oh my God. First of all, one governor told me that every time I opened my mouth, millions of dollars flowed out. And I said, yes, Governor, you are exactly right. But I also want to always say and end with moments of opportunity. So we know that there's a bunch of different opportunities out there. And one of them is ESSER funding. ESSER funding is federal relief funding. And ESSER 3 is from the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Act. It brings to Rhode Island's public school districts $373.6 million, and combined with ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, which were two previous relief bills from the feds, it totals $581.6 million from these three federal stimulus packages. ESSER 3 funds can be used to create transformative change that students and families want by providing equitable resources needed to help students thrive academically, physically, and emotionally. A minimum of 20% of the funds from ESSER 3 must be used to address the academic impact and lost instructional time through evidence-based interventions that respond to students' social, emotional, and academic needs and address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on students of color, students from low-income families, students receiving special education services, multilingual learners, students experiencing homelessness, and students in foster care. And those are all students that really need a voice and really need community coming to school districts and saying, hey, when you have to make some priorities about where this money goes, you need to remember these groups of students who are so often left out and so often up against it without the resources that they need to thrive. School districts have until September 30th, 2023 to commit their ESSER 3 funds and an additional 12 months to spend these funds. School districts must review and are encouraged to revise their ESSER 3 plans every 6 months. I just wanted to say that, again, I'm going to turn to my colleague Paige Clushes-Parks did an exhaustive, isn't that the right word, Paige? An exhaustive review, an equity review of all the ESSER 3 plans from all of the school districts in Rhode Island, and found that, let me get the exact right number, about 83% or 30 school districts allocated funds to social and emotional learning and mental and behavioral health. This includes funding for school psychologists, social workers, student assistance counselors, and curriculum programs that have an emotional component. We need to ensure that these dollars are spent incredibly well, and we need to take steps to look at state funding for children's behavioral health so that when these federal dollars go away, we are ready not to have this huge cliff effect with lots of kids and families falling off the cliff, but we're ready to kind of seamlessly say, okay, here's what's worked the best. How can we infuse more state dollars? And very importantly, how can we use Medicaid dollars better and more effectively? There is a great resource from Education Commission of the States that I will make sure that Nora can send around to everybody, and it really highlights states that have been meeting student mental health needs by more creative uses of Medicaid, which of course takes state match, but is really an important source. So I just want to end by saying that the kids can't wait. The kids can't wait. I think about what it must be like to be a parent and know your child has a behavioral or mental, a children's behavioral health or mental health issue, and you can't get services. Or someone from your pediatrician says, try these 6 numbers, and they all have waiting lists of 3 to 6 months. I just can't imagine a more desperate feeling, both as a student and as a parent, that I can't meet a life and death need of my own child. So I think we have to take this all back to, it's about every one of our families, it's about our neighbors, it's about kids who, for the first time, get mental health treatment when they go to the juvenile training school. That's completely outrageous. We need to back it up. We need to go upstream, as they say, focus on prevention, early identification, and make sure that instead of fixating on the major problem of kids boarding at emergency rooms while they wait for a bed at Bradley and Wings of Butler and Hasbro, that we certainly need to fix that acute care problem, but kids shouldn't be getting their behavioral and mental health care in a psychiatric hospital. And kids shouldn't be stuck in psych hospitals for months and sometimes a year for lack of a place to have them go as they step down toward being reunited with their family. So there's plenty to do. Everybody in here, you're my heroes. I mean, I look around this room and what a turnout this is of people who care about this issue so much. The kids can't wait, and you have what it takes, whether you're leading the Senate or in the Senate, and all of the senators that I didn't mention. Thank you so much for your patience as we all testify night after night, and for all that all of you do, and that all these community leaders and students can do. We can make a difference, and we can do it with urgency. Thank you so much.
Before we continue with the program, it's important that we pause and recognize the incredible work of our friend Elizabeth Burke Bryant. Due to her leadership and the incredible team she built around her, Rhode Island Kids Count has been a trusted and impactful advocate for children and families for decades. The Senate has always looked to the data and the policy analysis from Kids Count to inform our work, and we want you to know how important you have been in the collective effort of pass landmark legislation to serve children. On behalf of the Senate President, Senator Chair Cano, and myself, and all of our colleagues here from the Senate, those that could be here and those that weren't able to make it, we extend our deepest appreciation to you, Elizabeth, and we want you to have the happiest of years and a wonderful retirement. And if you come, please come up here. Wait for Senator Cano, please. He's afraid.
He's afraid of us.
I was always afraid of you, Elizabeth. Every time I saw you in my office, as you said, I know we're going to come up with some money.
Yes, now it's for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, how you guys doing? So thank you, Elizabeth and Senator Gallo. I think that data presentation or that remarks would be better suited with a data presentation. That's what is next up here. And I'm excited to bring up a member of Elizabeth's talent team to walk us through their latest policy brief and data on children's mental health. Please welcome Rhode Island Kids Count Policy Analyst, Caitlin Rapp, which is amazing.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Rabb, Policy Analyst at Rhode Island Kids Count. And today I'm going to walk you through some highlights from our data brief that we released this week. There are some on the tables and around, but we will be sure to send the link out to everyone for the full brief, which you can find online. So what is children's mental health and why is it so important? Mental health in childhood and adolescence is defined as reaching expected developmental, cognitive, social, and emotional milestones and the ability to use effective coping skills. That's what we need to know. And so similar to the national prevalence, as Elizabeth said, in Rhode Island, 1 in 5 children ages 6 to 17 has a diagnosable mental health condition, and 1 in 10 has significant functional impairment. So even though many children have mental health challenges, lots do not get the help that they need. And so as Elizabeth said, in 2021, only about 1 in 5, or 22% of Rhode Island high school students reported receiving the help that they needed when feeling anxious or depressed. So this shows that 4 out of 5 of our high school students aren't getting the help that they need. Nationally, children and youth were experiencing mental health challenges before the pandemic, but since the onset of the pandemic, the number of children experiencing anxiety and depression has increased. Children have experienced many changes in their daily lives, including school closures and virtual learning, isolation from their peers and caregivers, disruptions in their schedules, economic insecurity, increased stress and uncertainty, as well as losing parents, caregivers, and other loved ones. So we really are in a state of emergency nationally and in Rhode Island when it comes to children's mental health. So in 2020, the state of emergency in children's mental health was declared by these organizations, and they also provided recommendations that Elizabeth went over earlier. This is that KidsLink data that Elizabeth was talking about that shows the spike in calls to the KidsLink hotline after the onset of the pandemic. So as you can see in FY 21, the calls really spiked up. And they remain higher now, but the FY 21 was when they really went really high. In 2021, 38% of Rhode Island high school students reported feeling sad or hopeless for more than 2 weeks during the past year, continuing this upward trend. Girls were twice as likely as boys to report these feelings, and LGBTQ students reported higher rates of sadness and hopelessness than their peers. Almost 10% of Rhode Island students reported attempting suicide 1 or more times during the past year. So we see that there is a problem, and we're facing a lot of challenges right now. And how have we gotten here? Kind of what contributes to this system that we are in right now? So there's really limited mental health care capacity for our children and youth. So youth that need and want mental health services really struggle to get adequate, timely, and affordable care. And this inaccessibility is caused by insurance-related barriers, lack of clinicians, extremely long wait lists, and more. And even more critical of an issue is the ongoing workforce crisis that has left low levels of staffing across service agencies. And key reasons for this shortage include chronic underfunding, low reimbursement rates for mental health services, especially through Medicaid, low wages and high demand of workers, which can lead to high worker burnout and high turnover rates. So what we need, mental health is an important part of physical health, and the continuum of care should focus on prevention and promotion of mental health and wellness strategies, as well as the treatment of mental health diagnoses. So Rhode Island really needs a comprehensive continuum of mental health care for our children and adolescents that goes beyond the high-end emergency room treatment, that offers the right care at the right time and in the right place. And as Elizabeth said, schools are a key role in this effort. So in terms of promotion and of mental health and wellness, we need a healthy school climate. And in our schools, we need to destigmatize mental health. In terms of prevention and early intervention, we need mental health screenings in our schools. In terms of services for mild and moderate cases of mental illness, we need enough school-based services as counselors, psychologists, and social workers. So we can't, Dr. Pat Flanagan at our event on Monday said that we can't treat our way out of this. And this shows that schools have a really big impact on how we're gonna do this, and not just with treatment, it's with prevention and promotion of mental health. There are also other sectors that are going to be involved in this, but I'm going to focus on schools for this one. So mental health is an important part of physical health and the continuum of care. So schools. Kids are at schools for a majority of their day. They spend a lot of time there, and what happens at school has an impact on the mental health of our kids. This is why a healthy school climate including school-based mental health resources and school-based mental health professionals, really help promote and protect youth mental well-being, as well as sustains positive school experiences and can improve mental health outcomes for our youth. So one program we want to highlight that's highlighted in the brief is Project Aware. It's a program designed to increase the capacity for the school to create safe and secure environments that promote the mental health of kids at schools by providing training among school personnel, so they can better detect and respond to mental health among all students. And they can connect those students who have emotional disturbances and mental illness to the services that they need. Another program that we want to highlight is the Universal Social, Emotional, and Behavioral Screening, which is an evidence-based method for identifying the presence of protective factors and indicators of well-being, and identifying those students who exhibit early signs of mental illness and those at risk of developing mental health challenges to serve those youth later on. As Elizabeth talked about, the Trauma-Informed Schools Act passed during the 2022 legislative session and requires all administrators, teachers, and staff in every Rhode Island public school to receive trauma-informed training. This training will help teachers and administrators look beyond just academic performance and consider the underlying causes of behavior, including mental health impacted by past trauma. These trainings include restorative practices, social emotional learning, and positive disciplinary practices, which are effective approaches for addressing student trauma and helping to create positive student-teacher relationships, improve the student's sense of belonging, build safe schools, and increase academic outcomes. So beyond just promoting mental wellness in all schools, for students, schools should also provide intervention and treatment for students with additional mental health needs. So school-based mental health services are delivered by trained mental health professionals who are employed by the schools, such as school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers, and school nurses. And these mental health professionals can then refer youth to more intensive services in the community when needed. So this graph here kind of shows where we are in Rhode Island for the student to mental health professional ratio. The recommended ratio is 500 to 700 students per school psychologist, 250 students per school social worker, and a recommended ratio of 250 students per school counselor. As you can see here, Rhode Island is above the recommended ratio in all categories. For example, during the 2020 school year, there were 67 counselors in the Providence Public School District, resulting in a ratio of 358 to 1 student to counselor ratio. Again, well above this 250 recommended ratio. So there are risk factors for mental health challenges in childhood, including environmental factors like prenatal exposure to toxins, abuse, toxic stress, genetics, involvement in the juvenile justice or child welfare systems at a young age, and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, and trauma can be experienced by any child at any point in their life. Children who experience a loss during COVID-19, children living in poverty, children who have experienced or witnessed racism or violence, children who have been removed from their families and placed into foster care, and children with disabilities often suffer trauma and attend schools that are unequipped to meet their mental health needs and emotional needs, which can perpetuate and introduce new traumas. So adversities faced during childhood disrupt the development of the brain and biological systems and can result in short and long-term negative outcomes for children. So we know that ACEs experienced by youth impact youth mental health in both the long and the short term. So to both prevent mental health conditions and to promote mental wellness, these factors must be acknowledged and addressed throughout all stages of life. We know that exposure to risk factors for mental health disorders accumulate over time and contribute to inequities and other consequential outcomes. So therefore, it's really important to focus on mental well-being throughout the entire life cycle, starting with infant and early childhood mental wellness, and going into adolescence and transitioning into the adult mental health system. These risk factors disproportionately impact our youth of color. Disparities in mental health treatment can be attributed to, again, underlying determinants of mental health, including poverty, ACEs, chronic stress, racism, and discrimination. These disparities also span across treatment for mental health as well. While the rates of mental health treatment are low for all youth, youth of color are significantly less likely to receive treatment. And when they do receive treatment, it is more likely to be inadequate due to a lack of a diverse and culturally and linguistically competent workforce. Youth of color were also more likely to have their mental health impacted by the pandemic due to COVID-related stressors that we all know. Another population that is at increased risk of mental health conditions are LGBTQ youth. LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to have mental health conditions and suicidal ideation than their peers. And were also disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Nationally, 62% of gay, lesbian, or bisexual youth, 64% of other or questioning youth reported that their mental health was not good most of the time or always during the COVID-19 pandemic, compared to 30% of heterosexual youth. And then this graph here shows the mental health status of youth and suicidality by sexual orientation. And 76% of gay, lesbian, or bisexual youth reported feeling sad or hopeless. 69% of other or questioning youth reported feeling sad or hopeless. And 37% of heterosexual youth felt sad or hopeless. So this kind of disparity that we're seeing here spans across all kind of suicidality, from the percent who felt sad or hopeless to the percent who seriously considered attempting suicide to the percent who are actually attempting suicide. And, within our LGBTQ youth community, transgender and non-binary youth have even higher mental health needs than our cisgender LGBTQ youth. Nationally, more than half of our transgender non-binary youth seriously considered suicide in the past year, compared to 33% of our cisgender LGBTQ youth. And they report being worried about anti-trans legislation that would deny them of access of gender-affirming medical care. And LGBTQ youth who lost access to school-based services during the COVID-19 pandemic may have had increased youth mental health needs due to lockdowns and being in environments where they might not have been supported or accepted. So at Kids Count, we really want to focus and highlight and call out these disparities and really address them systemically. So next, we're going to go over some of the recommendations in our brief, and these first on how to address this children's mental health crisis. First, looking at prevention strategies to work towards mental well-being for all kids before the mental health challenges occur. So we need to focus on mental health promotion and prevention in schools and communities. Provide families with the economic and community supports they need to thrive, so children do not face homelessness, poverty, child neglect and abuse, community violence, and toxic stress that are often precursors to mental health problems. And we need to advocate for policies that support the secure attachment of infants and young children in early childhood to parents and caregivers, including paid family leave, increase access to high-quality childcare by increasing rates and compensation for early educators, increase access to early intervention, and identifying and treating parental mental health and physical health challenges, including maternal depression. Next, looking at recommendations for our children's mental health system and the services. We need to create and invest a seamless and coordinated system of behavioral health care that provides the right care at the right time and in the right place and supports children as they grow and transition to adults. We need to fully fund and prioritize comprehensive community-based systems of care that connect families in need of outpatient behavioral health services and supports for their children with evidence-based interventions in their home, community, or schools, as well as follow up with families to overcome any barriers to care. We recommend to increase state funding, including Medicaid rates, dedicated to ensuring that all families and children from infancy through adolescence can access evidence-based mental health screening, diagnosis, and treatment to appropriately address their mental health needs, with a particular emphasis on meeting the needs of our under-resourced and marginalized populations. We recommend to address the longstanding workforce challenges in mental health, including innovative training programs developed collaboratively, like the loan repayment and reduced or free tuition, consistent with the Rhode Island Promise grants, intensified efforts to recruit and retain underrepresented populations into mental health professions, training the workforce and others involved in children's lives, and increasing that school-based mental health professionals as well. And we need to advance policies that ensure compliance with and enforcement of mental health parity laws. I know, lots of recommendations here. We have lots to do. We need to continue to track and implement the implementation of recently passed legislation and policies to improve the mental health of children in Rhode Island, including the Nathan Bruno Act, the Trauma-Informed Schools Act, and the Infant Early Childhood Mental Wellness Act. We recommend to improve the oversight and administrative coordination of children's behavioral health in coordination with the adult behavioral health system in that transition. We need increased data collection efforts to track mental health needs for children and youth. For example, requiring ACEs screenings in primary care offices and including screening data to track and see if children in the ER for mental health needs have had any prior mental health intervention. We need to increase implementation and sustainable funding of effective models of school-based mental health care with clinical strategies, with a mental health warm line for school staff to access, which is comparable with the existing PDPRN model, which is a teleconsultation line for pediatricians, and models for payment such as the PCMH Kids model. We need to incentivize adoption of effective and financially sustainable models of integrated mental health care and primary care pediatrics, including clinical strategies and models for payment. And last, address the ongoing challenges of the acute care needs of children and adolescents, including shortage of beds and emergency room boarding by expanding access to short stay stabilization units and community-based response teams. And lastly, address regulatory challenges and improve access and availability of telemedicine to provide mental health care to all populations. So as you can see in those recommendations, schools are ingrained throughout the entire thing, and that's really one of the focuses and one of the areas that we can really make a difference. So thank you.
Hey, Caitlin?
Absolutely.
That we'll take around, but that was a lot. I want to make sure folks have a chance to ask you any questions. So raise your hand if you have questions for Caitlin. If not, we'll keep going. I think this mic is going to work eventually by the time I get to you. Excuse me, sorry, thank you.
Caitlin, you had a slide there about the mother, it was a slide about the child. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Can you go back to that slide?
We can find it. This?
Before this one. And the ACEs. Can you talk a little bit more? Because I think it's important for all of us to kind of recognize what all this means. I think oh, now it's working. Okay. If you can walk us through this, I think that that's important for everybody to leave with that understanding.
Yes, so ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and maltreatment, child neglect or abuse is one example of adverse childhood experiences. So as this kind of picture shows here, we have abuse, we have neglect, we also have household dysfunction, and these all really contribute to how trauma can occur in childhood, and how ACEs kind of involve. I know Kelsey is here. This is her expertise. But I also want to say that children who have 4 or more ACEs are more likely to have mental health conditions. So this is kind of one factor that we look at when looking at, okay, how do we, that an ACE is there, okay, how do we protect that or work on protective factors as well? Does that kind of make sense? Okay.
Last call for questions.
Thank you. This is excellent, Shannon Gilkey. I'm curious. I know we're focusing a lot on the child population, but I'm speaking with our presidents, and I don't know if anyone from the University of Rhode Island. That was my most recent conversation about the crisis happening on college campuses. I mean, we're seeing in some cases a 300% increase in requests for mental health services, and I'm curious, kind of the thinking behind framing it as a, pre-K through. And not through P20, which would extend into at least the first 2 years of post-secondary. When thinking about how we look at providing support services for our children that then become adults in an education pipeline.
Yeah, so I would say right now, kind of the two systems between children's behavioral health, and adult behavioral health is kind of cut off at 18 per se, but when really we need more of a transition between what's an adult behavioral health system and what's childhood and adolescence. And that's a really important and critical period. A lot of changes, a lot of things are going on. That's something that we also really need to focus on in terms of how to get our young adults and adolescents who, are 18, 19, 20, those services that they need and have effective transitions to those adult-based services.
One more. We got time for one more.
Hi, thank you. Hello? I was just wondering if some of the data around the systems, would be shared in future summits, because I think we talk a lot about the school-based mental health professionals and increasing them, but without the systems to support them and a strong team, it's really difficult to provide those services and to make those connections. So that's just a question about maybe in the future if that's certain data that we can include as far as a multi-tiered system of supports in our schools. What are the things that need to be in place to support our admin and our support teams in building those systems to really support the professionals in providing these services?
Yeah, that's a very great point. And I know that Gigi is here, but Gigi was saying that our teachers are not healthy, and how can we support them in helping our students? So I think that that's something that we really need to look at and find some data on. Thank you for that point. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I'm out.
So isn't Caitlin excellent? Not only she took us through all that data and didn't even take a breath. She was going. But she really is someone that the Senate really can reach out to and work together, and is always advocating for us to do the right thing. I just want to acknowledge that we are running behind, but it's a good thing. I want to be respectful of your time, but at the same time, if you have to leave and we go past the time, we'll make sure to send that survey. Remember, we're going to send that survey because we need your feedback in order for us to be proactive about doing action items and actually getting them done. And I'm looking at the president. He knows we're getting them done this year. Okay, next up is a first panel that I'd like to introduce, a set of panelists that are excellent and very diverse, that are going to talk to us about their experiences on their fields. First up, we have Kristen Belen, a teacher in the North Kingston School District, who has been working with colleagues to develop tools to support educators and the staff mental health. Let's welcome Kristen, and thank you for being here. So we have an educator that is really doing the work. It's very exciting. Then we have next Ramona Santos Torres, who's the co-founder and executive director at PLEAD, which is the Party Leading for Educational Equity. Ramona, thank you for being here, and she is being the voice of the parents today. So Ramona, welcome. We also have joined us today by Jurudat. Did I say that right? Say it again. Wujura. Okay, I'm getting there. Wujura, who is the youth leader representing Young Voices, and currently she is a student at Classical High School in Providence. Wujura, we are thrilled to have you with us today as the voice of the students. We don't want to assume what they need. We're going to ask her what they need. Finally, we have Gigi DiVello, who has been a leader in Rhode Island education for many years and is currently serving as the coordinator for Project Aware in Woonsocket Public Schools. Let's welcome Gigi, and thanks for being with us today to share what's happening in Woonsocket. Okay, so this is an amazing panel. We're gonna start with, I'm going to be asking some questions, and we're going to try to make this interactive so you guys have the opportunity to ask some questions as well. But I'm gonna start with my favorite voice in this table, which is our youth. So I'm a little biased, I'm sorry. I think that it's for them and why we are here. So can you describe what Young Voices is and share why you involved with that organization at the time?
Yes. Is this working? If it isn't, I could just project my voice. So hello again, my name is Wujura Balagan. I am a junior at Classical High School, and it's really awesome to be here today. And Young Voices is a nonprofit organization that works with high school youth, predominantly BIPOC youth from Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence included. And we work on elevating youth voice through policy making that will change our lives and eventually the world. And the reason why I'm involved with Young Voices is because, I mean, look at me right now. Look at me sitting here right now. I mean, if I wasn't a part of Young Voices, I wouldn't be sitting here. I think the opportunities to change what we want to be changed in our schools and community is what really keeps me here. And I love opportunities, so I'm gonna take advantage of it. So, and yeah.
And I'm gonna just follow up and ask you, from your perspective, what makes it harder to get in the way of a student accessing mental health support?
One, I think representation. Especially for BIPOC youth. We want to see people like us, talking to us, relating to us, And another thing is we need that welcoming environment for us. We're not just gonna come talk to you unless we feel that you're ready to listen. And Mr. Sachs said, or was it Mr. Sachs? Mr. Sachs said a couple of days ago actually, when we did this PD together, is that if you'd have to go to the emergency room to receive help, we've already failed them. And that's really powerful because we need we need these help in our schools. It is from, because we spend so much hours in our schools too. Like, we need this mental help in our schools so then we can venture into the world and make it better. Stable minds create stable community.
That is right. And I'm going to ask Ramona, what are you hearing from parents involved at PLEAD about mental health needs of their children and the ability of services to support them?
Well, thank you. Let me see. I'm not good with technology. Is it? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So thank you, Senator Cano, for inviting us for centering the voices of parents and students. Really, as a parent of a young person who is struggling, who has a struggle with mental illness most of her life, this is an issue that I know very well. But also from the perspective of the families, what we are seeing and hearing is that the issues are starting at a very young age, right? So we are seeing that more of our families are coming to us with very young children saying, I don't know what's going on, but something is not right. Then how do I ask for help? Where do I go? And let me tell you, when we think about accessing services, which is what we are looking at PLEAD, so how do we help these families navigate a very complex system? Then when we think about the language barrier, when we think about the immigration status of many families, when we think about that access, the mountain become even taller. So for me as a parent who, again, a parent of this young adult, with the privilege that I have, I'm struggling, right, to get access to mental health supports. And I have the language skills. I think I'm a pretty good advocate, so I don't have a problem advocating for my child, and still I'm struggling. So this idea, and I want to put this myth to rest, that when parents are not getting what they need for their children, it's not because we're not advocating. Because even here, sitting here, I'm struggling. So imagine when we go out there and we're trying to serve, and kudos to our parent leaders over here at PLEAD, because they do that every day. And we need to increase that capacity of parents supporting other parents to navigate this system. So we are seeing a lack of access, a lack of understanding how to get into the system, a lack of, even knowing where to go, what is available. That is huge. In our schools particularly, we are trying to really figure out what's available in my child's school and who do I even talk to. I'll tell you a brief story. We did a training last year, and we asked our parents to go and call their schools or go into their schools and ask, who's my social worker, who is my special education teacher. There was this particular school who told this particular parent that they needed to talk to me first. And I was like, oh boy, that conversation is not gonna go well if this person talks to me. But you know what happens? The parent got scared because I was gonna talk to the principal, and I was gonna say, the parent has a right to have this information. This is not for PLEAD, like I don't want this information, but the parent has a right to know that, right? So, the parent got intimidated, he was scared that they were gonna face, repercussions, and we couldn't move past that. So those are some of the barriers that we know our families are facing. Our families wanna be partners in this work. I hope to share later on some of the good things that I have experienced in those relationships that have worked and that I know that can work. But also acknowledging that we are all struggling. This is a collective struggle. We are all burnt out. I think maybe 99.99% of us are tired. So I think coming from a place of compassion and understanding where we are all at right now and how we can make it better.
Thank you, Ramona. What I'm hearing from both of our panelists right now, and actually Commissioner Gilkey mentioned this, is that we almost kind of need a one-stop shop of resources for mental health from early education up to post-secondary education, because adult professionals also are struggling with mental health. So the difficulty is that we all together need to figure out how to do that. But I think that one-stop shop could be a start. right? We gather resources, 'cause there's so many things that are happening that I think that even our schools, parents, youth could be like, it could be a helpful thing to get those resources in one place only. And we could work on it together. But Gigi, let's talk about the goals of Project Aware and the work that you're doing in Woonsocket.
Push this button here, right? I think so. You think so? I don't think that did it for me. No, that's okay. Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is. Okay, good. When you said one-stop shopping, I knew you were going to me.
Good.
So I am here for Woonsocket today, but I have to say I carry with me all of my experiences of the last 35 years, 40 years, maybe if I'm honest, and actually more than that as a student, right? So I first want to acknowledge the student who's here with me today, Deshanae Francis from Woonsocket. Thank you, Oh. You better not be filming me with that camera, Deshanae. So I want to acknowledge her because she's definitely a part of the work that we're doing in Woonsocket, which I hope to highlight later as well. And as you were all talking, actually, I was thinking of a friend of mine, Sam Seidel, who's at the Stanford D School, and a book he recently wrote with a colleague called Creative Hustle. And I was thinking that, hustle has a negative connotation, but I actually feel like the district hustler, actually, in Woonsocket. That's what I feel like my title should be. That's what I feel like I'm doing. The Project Aware grant was mentioned in the presentation. It's a federal grant. Woonsocket, Providence, and Pawtucket were first granted the Providence Aware in 2018. Did I say Providence Aware? That's not right. Project Aware. And Natalie's question came before because Natalie and I have worked together quite a bit and enjoyed that relationship still. But we're in our 5th year now of Project Aware, and I've been in lots of places in Rhode Island. I came here to work at Brown as the director of the Women's Center, and then from there, I started the Highlander Charter School with a bunch of colleagues and was at AmeriCorps as the training director and head of school at Sophia Academy. I was in Providence Public School for a couple of years. I'm not saying that to give you my resume. I'm saying it to you because in my current role, I come trying to build bridges, trying to do collaborations, trying to work with community-based agencies, with students and parents at the table together, because that is the only way we are going to do this work. That is the only way. So to me, that's about creative hustle, and I sat at a table today with the police chief in Woonsocket and the superintendent and 3 members from the Nonviolence Institute and principals from the high school. And, everyone's scratching our head because we have a really, really bad problem right now around violence in Woonsocket. And I know you're shaking your heads too because it's not just in Woonsocket, of course. It's a teeny state, and so it's coming from all different places, and it's after a 2.5-year pandemic that's not over yet, really, folks, right? And so all the stuff you saw up there, and people, they're dysregulated all over the place, not just kids, right? Our teachers are struggling deeply, okay? They have compassion fatigue, whatever words you want to use. It's hard right now. And the police chief was talking to the principal, and you better not quote me on this, right? So, but basically what he said was, we need creative hustle. Now, he didn't use those words, but the principal was lamenting that he needs to follow the rules, and there's certain things he can't share, and he can't do this, and he can't do that. And the police chief said, look, I hear you. I have to follow rules too. But the only way we're going to make a difference here, the only way we're going to save lives is if we look at other ways to address these problems, because the things we're doing are not working. So Project Aware is supposed to focus, and at least in Woonsocket, our focus is in 3 buckets. It's basically policy and structures, okay? It's outreach, and then it's programs that have to do with prevention. So we chose to focus our monies on restorative practice back in 2018. I've been there 2 years next month, so not even not even 2 years yet. And at this point, we have trained, but it's not enough to train all the educators in the district in restorative practices, which means virtually nothing without the structures, the mindset shift, the coaches, the everyday modeling, really innovative, thoughtful principals that can own when they make mistakes, look in the mirror, right? All that stuff, right? So we've done that. In terms of the training focus, we've focused on training adults and youth mental health first aid, and we have enough to then lead us to training youth right? So we were the first in the state, I'm sort of sick of saying it, but it's big, to train young people in teen mental health first aid. Not the first school, because guess what? Wheeler did it. I'm just going to let that sit there. Yes, Barrington has a nice high school or a nice middle school. And yes, Wheeler trained their students in teen mental health. But we were the first public school district to do it. I'll tell you why, because we have creative hustle. Okay, we had to push past lots of stuff. But I surprised our peer mentor advisors, who'd been peer mentor advisors at our school for 5 years, because they didn't think the students would want that training. And I knew they would. But that's because of my work at Sophia and my work at Highlander and some of the work around culturally responsive teaching in Providence. And guess what happened when they got the training? They sat up taller and they said, now we want more. So Deschanet's been trained not through Woonsocket Public Schools, but through the community organization that she's one of the heads at in Narcan training, and saved someone's life a month ago.
So Gigi, so what you're telling us is that hustle is really a holistic approach, and that is amazing. And I know I just gotta give a shout out to Senator Murray, because I know what she is feeling right now. She's very proud of her community in Woonsocket, and she's always hustling from Woonsocket. So I'm happy that you provide those details for us to really learn from best practices and see how we can expand it. And you talk about also not only the students, the parents, but we're going to the educators. And that's why I'm looking at Kristen. And this is the opportunity for me to give a shout out to the great unions that are here. So thank you, NEA Rhode Island. Thank you, AFT, for all the work that you guys really do around protecting and making sure that the educators really have the most support that they deserve. They're the ones taking care of our kids, so we need to take care of them as well. So, Kristen, can you describe what you and your colleagues have been working on North Kingston? I think that it's great that you have taken the lead to do this. So please enlighten us on telling us how we can do this better.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be sitting up here. I've been in the field for 19 years, going on 20 in North Kingstown, working at the only Title I funded school with a transient population and looking at a tremendous amount of trauma over the years. That population really started to alter and change 5 years before the pandemic, and it was during the pandemic I thought to myself, my gosh, we need to stop and pause. We can't keep doing things the way that we're doing it. My principal was like, what do we do? And I said to her, we need to become a trauma-informed school. She listened to me. She was like, okay, let's make this happen. And we got a group of educators together to get our own professional development and bring it back to our staff. Over the pandemic, I saw students who I deeply love and care about falling apart. And I can't have that because they're like my family. A school is an ecosystem. And the parents and the children and the teachers in that ecosystem have to thrive together in order for them to walk out and make that generational success. But we can't do that if the teachers are not thriving alongside them. I tell my parents at open house every single year, your child just became my family. They are with me for 6.5 hours a day, and without you realizing it, I am mentally and emotionally taking them home with me at night, because my job is to love and care about them, to make sure they become stronger, happier people, but also to succeed academically. And in my level of thought, that comes last, because they can't learn if they're not social and emotionally well. I care so much about this that I sought my own trauma-informed certification over the pandemic. And I went back to my school. Thank you. I went back to my school and I walked into a place that I didn't even recognize. It didn't feel like home. I had never seen so many students crumbling and the teachers following. And that was interesting to me because I was the last veteran teacher standing in that building. They had all moved to other schools in the district. At that point in time, our assistant superintendent of schools and I started to talk, and she was like, you know, We have a dynamic teacher focused on the same things that you are, and you don't even know each other. How sad is that? I'm at the elementary level, she's at the high school level. We've been in the same district forever. And her name was Lisa Garcia. She is our district and state teacher of the year, and she really wanted to focus on the wellness of educators. And she said, Kristen, I feel like you're with me on this. I said, 100%. I said, because if we're not well, they're not well, and the entire community falters and falls. Because when they go home not well, it affects the families and parents. She's like, what are we gonna do? I'm like, I'm not sure. And so this summer we got together and we said, you know what? It's not just us. We can't say educator wellness, that's not fair. It comes down to humans. So all those people that you saw in the Rhode Island Kids Count slide, the custodians, the bus drivers, our food service people, our administrators who are trying to support us. And the red tape to get help for kids is so thick. I'll be perfectly honest and vulnerable. I have sat multiple times at the end of a meeting and watched our school psychologist, social worker, and myself slowly have tears fall because we knew what the child needed, and either due to Medicaid funding for the parent or the lack of resources for the student, we had to fight again to make it happen. It shouldn't work like that if we know what students need. So Lisa and I got together this summer and we said, okay, the first step is honoring teacher voice. We're with them. We're like their family. So we need to be heard and listened to. We went to our assistant super and we said, listen, we want to put together a survey to see how educators are. We looked at our survey works data and we saw that the biggest portion that was falling was our school culture, each school's culture. We said, what are we going to do about this? And in the packet that you have in front of you, I gave you the question that we asked. The number one question that came out was, what obstacle leaves you going home from work with the belief that you could not do your job to your best ability? Because as our parent to the side of me said, you're right, this is a collective trauma. Educators are walking in with their own families and lives and experiences and still trying to carry those of our students. And so school culture came out the lowest, and we said, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take the voices of all the people in this survey and the 5 questions that we gathered. We're gonna make them anonymous. We're gonna go to our administration, and we're gonna put together a PD called The Road Back. How do we build back? Well, we're gonna build back by building a stronger school culture for everyone in there. And how are we gonna do that? We're gonna focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness. We're gonna look at them and we're gonna see what these teachers had to say and take their anonymous voices and say, do we have the support and resources to fix any of this? And if not, then we need to come together and figure out what those supports and resources are. So 2 things came out of it. The first one was the administrators felt the same way. And they were like, we're crumbling too. We gotta do this together. How do we do this? And we said, by building norms and boundaries. Families want norms and boundaries. Students want norms and boundaries. Teachers need norms and boundaries in order to keep going. The second thing we decided was we have to be heard across the board. All of us need to be heard. She's in school, I'm providing the learning, and the parent is seeing the outcome or not outcome of both. And if people don't start creating policies from the voices in the field, then we're just going to continue on the path that we're on. Apparently, it was powerful enough, and the administrators were like, we're in. We're going to do this. Can you give this to the Strategic Planning Committee? And I said, absolutely. So we met with the Strategic Planning Committee, and thank you, Jen Lima, for being here as part of our school committee. She was here, and she was able to listen to our PD. They were like, how do we start the year so educators know they're valued and they're wanted and feel joyful going back into the classroom? I said, not starting with the general policies of what's expected from us. Let's start convocation with a joyful speaker who brings energy into the room and makes people feel so good about being back. And they listened, and we did that. So then everybody said, well, what's coming next? We only started. Our superintendent and Lisa were able to meet with the Rhode Island Department of Ed, and we found out that Child Trends was going to pilot an educator wellness toolkit. We won the pilot for our district, and we're putting together a committee of ourselves and other educator voices, and eventually we hope to expand it even further, to gather data to see if the policies that we put in practice in place have a positive effect on our educators, our students, and our families. Because at the end of the day, it's not good enough to have one school with a positive school culture. We have to have a positive district culture that's thriving together, because if one school doesn't, the whole thing falls. We're basically asking, please listen to us. Give teachers the opportunities to come sit at the table like you gave me tonight, and I feel so grateful for it, to advocate for us, our parents, our students, for our schools. Let's recognize the fact that this is really an emergency, and it doesn't matter what part of the state you're in, because I can tell you right now, I did change my school, and I see it at the new one as well. And no one would have expected that. We need to take care of our families and our students, and that starts as well by taking care of your teachers. I'm so grateful to NEA for having me, and I think we can make some transformative change.
So Kristen, I think that your passion really goes across the board. And it is because of your leadership that these changes are happening. So we need more of you, and we need more of you at the table. And just to finish this panel, because I know we have to move along and we have more questions, but we just are running out of time. I want to ask all of you just to give me a 1-minute response of what are the recommendations of what more needs to be done in your own, group representation. So what policy, what recommendations, what ideas do you think we need to really implement to make this work? So let's start with Gigi.
So I have to say, I never lead with my policy foot. I lead with my educator foot all the time. But one thing that strikes me is that in most school districts, SEL and the kind of work we're talking about comes under special ed. And I know that Providence has done some work to change that structure, and I think it's worth looking at because, if it lives in special ed, it's really not geared towards all students. And we know that the only way this is going to work is if we look at tier 1 approaches, which is approaches that are for all students. And I would say right now that's relevant for many reasons because we have a collective crisis that has been said many times. So there's that piece. And then a lot of health wellness policies in districts do not include mental health. So that's a quick, easy fix. And then finally, I know this isn't a policy thing, but I'll say that I think what's moving the work along in Woonsocket is because I am not a principal. I am not the superintendent. This is my focus. And it's my focus K-12. And I can also reach into communities and work with the Woonsocket heads, which I do all the time. And so in terms of sustainability, it has to be built in an effort that includes all pockets, students and families, multiple tables with students and families, and most of my colleagues, all of my colleagues in Woonsocket, don't actually have the time for that. So I think the superintendent feels really grateful that our funding has been extended through the Bradley grant of Project Aware. So we bought 4 more years in Providence and Pawtucket and Woonsocket. But I think really that means that he has somebody who can continue to move this work along and build structures and make sure it's happening from a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach. So thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Let's go to Gujudar. I think that you have a lot of ideas of what we can do to help, right?
Okay. So as all of you were talking, I was actually thinking about it. And what I'm thinking is going into the schools themselves, having students and teachers answer the question, how is your mental state now? And how can we all work together to make it better. Because students and teachers will be so happy to tell y'all about how they're really feeling. Because today I was still like saying my presidential speech, and I was talking about mental health, and this was really like a big point that came up in all of our speeches. So that tells us something, that, you know, we students are also seeing it too, and we are happy to give you more ideas to change for the better. I also think raising awareness is better. I was talking about this again. I'm gonna reference our last meeting about how awareness needs to be made in a community-like basis. I want to see posters in stores, billboards, buses, everywhere to raise awareness, because until every single person is thinking about mental health and how, oh my God, we need to have a stable mental health, we won't work to change it until we all work together to change. And that's my message.
Kristen, I think that you talked to us about driving culture and some of the things that are happening. Any immediate recommendation that we can take away today?
I think obviously I'm going to say that, like, one of the things that drives culture or breaks culture for teachers in a district is the collective bargaining agreement, and it shouldn't work that way. It's meant to help push things forward and move things along for teachers. And I think part of that collective bargaining isn't just having mental health care and funding for the students in the schools at that point in time, but for the teachers as well. They should have someone that they can readily turn to or have some support from. Time in that bargain agreement is so powerful for teachers to get together and talk and be able to use each other as support systems. That's a necessary thing. And the other thing was we had stuck in your packet, and there was a suggestion made, a white paper was written to Congress, and it talked about having teacher cabinets. Having a teacher cabinet at the district level, at the state level, and at the federal level, so that we can tell you what we're experiencing and what's not working and how to best serve our students, so that when all this data is being collected over time, you can have it in real time. We're giving you the data in real time of what we're seeing, thinking, and feeling and experiencing.
Thank you, Kristen. And Ramona.
I would try to be brief, but I want to uplift really one recommendation, and our parents have been identifying mental health as one of the priorities that we will be organizing, but really funding and prioritizing comprehensive community-based systems of care, those systems that are going to support families, and those systems that are going to connect families. People like PLE, people like us, right? Our parents, youth organizations who have connections with the community that otherwise, other folks don't have. So we need to invest in organizations that are well connected to the community, and that we have the relationships and the trust with those families and the people that we serve in a way that other people don't have. And I want to give a huge shout out to you, Kristen, for how you speak about this ecosystem, because that's the language that we are using at PLE. And you're absolutely right. When one piece of that ecosystem is not working, forget about it. And we are all part of the ecosystem. We all have a role to play. I, as a parent, have a role to play at home. You, as an educator, you as a community-based provider, like how are we owning our role? How are we getting the support that we need to do our jobs? And this collective struggle that we are going through, the only way to get out of this is going to be collectively. Having honest conversations where we are owning where we are not being able to, do what we need to do. And do it with compassion, not making assumptions of what's happening at home or what's happening in the classroom or what's happening at the principal's office. Asking questions, clarifying questions. So what's going on? How can I help? For me, the best experience was when I was able to email my daughter's teacher and say, she didn't sleep last night. So make sure that you watch out for her because she might be, she might walk out of your class today. So there was that email back to me. Okay, we had a great day. Awesome. Oh, but yeah, she walked out of class. And then we had that conversation, so how we strategize. But that comes with that relationship that sometimes is not there for a lot of multiple reasons. So how do we build that? And that's what we are lacking. Some of that we lost during the pandemic. So how do we get back to that?
Can I say, I think the most important thing she took from that and said from that is that in that ecosystem, there has to be a level of relational trust.
Yes.
Like the relational trust between a teacher and a student to have that relationship and be able to go to each other. Relational trust from admin to teachers, relational trust with parents, and it takes time. And that's where that level of compassion fatigue comes in across the board. Yes. But we can't afford to allow ourselves to drown in it because it takes building those relationships to collectively get better. You're right.
Yeah, and just to something really important for us also to ask young people and our children, even as young as they are, what do you need? Tell me what you need, and then honoring that, right? If we're gonna ask the students who are like, at the end of the day, they are paying the highest consequence for the failures of the system, we need to honor what they need. We need to put that in place and make the investments to create that system where our students are thriving. Together, all of us thriving together.
Well, thank you all. You guys are really amazing. I'm just gonna give one or two questions if you have from the audience, and then we're gonna go to the next panel because I think it's important if you could stay to talk about the issues from the workforce side. I think it's important that we listen. So, Elijah?
Thank you to all the panelists, of course, and my great panelists up there. Wujadat is absolutely the best. She does so much work for the community and is such a great youth advocate. There was a lot of great things shared, and I just want to talk a little bit, or ask a question about the collaborative approaches that the variety of you have all participated in, and primarily in Woonsocket. I'm very familiar with the Woonsocket. I was at the Boys and Girls Club today with Senator Murray this morning as they were opening, but can you talk a little bit as to how the resiliency that it took or in that collaborative approach, and how, although again, you're advocating for larger state funds, for federal appropriations or grants of sorts, and how do you go about that in a collaborative approach while simultaneously uplifting the smaller community partners that are exactly vital to that ecosystem?
So it's interesting, the HES meetings happen monthly, the steering committee meetings, and they're run by consensus. So anybody who's been in situations where you do consensus, it takes time. And something that was brought up very early on by you, I think, you said you have to listen, right? And if you ask them to talk and you don't listen, what's the point? So when you're including partners, you have to honor the culture of the organizations that you're working with, whatever culture they have, right? Often the school department cultures that clash with the cultures that you're honoring in the organizations you're working with, just like the clashes sometimes that occur between school department and families culturally, right? So I think really trying to allow for the kind of code shifting that has to happen, the time, the effort, being able to listen, all those things, it's not rocket science. It's just that often the people doing it don't have the luxury of time. So I think that because my lived experience has showed me that the only way to do this is collaborative, I'm willing to invest the time, and I know it's going to pay off in multiple, right? Like, it pays off so much. So right now, we're working with the HES to create 2 positions for community outreach workers specializing in nonviolence. That could be something that we try and pay for out of the school department budget, but it's actually not the best way to do it. So really looking at the best strategy to include your partners and move forward that way. We met today with the YWCA because they want us to train them in our model for restorative practice, which, by the way, we abandoned the initial model we used because it wasn't culturally responsive and it wasn't trauma-informed. And after working with the University of Chicago for 16 months, which I know some of my colleagues in this room did as well through the TREP Fellowship, we revamped our approach and we were able to say, we made a mistake, right? So I think just, really owning that you're one piece of the ecosystem in the schools department, you're not the whole thing, and if you don't move with, you're really not moving.
Any other questions? Last one? Okay, these women were amazing. Thank you so much for your passion and your voice today. Feel free to just get some snacks while we introduce our next panel. And let's just have Nora give us some guidance here.
Hang tight for 30 seconds. Yes. Yep. She works partners with private schools, but you don't have questions first. I just feel like we'll do none. Okay. Yeah. All right. She said that she doesn't have to answer the question directly. She wanted to fill in any gaps that that's whatever. I'm sorry to. It's up to you. I think if you want to just go with Vilna and then.
Yeah, I just feel like that
Yeah.
But whatever comes out of the conversation, I think we'll just. No, I thank you. I understand. I totally get it. That's the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can say that.
People are mostly hungry.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Thank you for everything.
Sorry, I ran so long.
I think it's good. It's a good song. I agree. 100% agree. If they get some food.
Yeah.
I'm starving myself. This baby's like, I need some food. Okay, I don't want to rush you, but I want to be... I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So while you get your snacks, I want to make sure that I continue with the next panel. We couldn't hold this summit without leaving time to talk about the workforce conditions impacting the healthcare sector, along with many other industries in our state. So we all recognize that without bringing new professionals into this work and without supporting the licensed professionals we have today, we will not be able to meet the needs of our youth. That is why I'm thrilled to introduce several people who can share insight about building a workforce pipeline and the consequences if we don't. First, please welcome Dr. Julio Sabater Jr. from Sabater Lab from Psychological Innovations in Pawtucket. Very proud of Dr. Sabater that is here. Dr. Sabater is a licensed clinical psychologist who serves children, adolescents, here, Dr. Sabater, adolescents, families, and adults, and offers bilingual treatment at his agency. And please welcome a representative from Rhode Island College School of Social Work. Vilna Tejada today is... Vilna is an assistant professor. Sure. Thank you. So Bilna is an assistant professor with the School of Social Work, and she serves as a field work advisory for MSW students. I want to say also and acknowledge Audrey Kiltland that was supposed to be here, but because of childcare responsibilities, she couldn't stay longer, and we understand how childcare is so important as part of this conversation as well. So they're going to share some of the work on their way to prepare our state's mental health workforce, and I thank them both for joining us today. So we're going to start with Dr. Savitar, which I'm very proud to know, and your advocacy and what you do in the city of Pawtucket. Please describe your practice and the pathway into this field.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So my name is Julio Sabater, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I am from Sabater Lab, Sabater Laboratory for Psychological Innovations. And so I don't work by myself. I work with my wife, Ivelisse Sabater, and she's here too. She's an educator, and together we offer psychological services. We do counseling, assessment, and consultation, and we do that bilingually. And we are very happy to be there in our community. It's in Pawtucket, right on Main Street in downtown Pawtucket, so which is very good. And we also, what we do more that we are passionate and committed to do is trauma work. So I've been trained and certified to do that. And I used to, before I was a licensed clinical psychologist, I was a school psychologist for 10 years in Providence, in the schools. So when I left, one of the goals was to make sure that I got trained in trauma to be able to provide services to the community and back to the students, in this case, Rhode Island. So I am very humbled to be able to do that along with my wife. And what got me to there, well, that's actually part of how I got into this position here with Sabater Lab in the community. So.
Thank you, Dr. Sabater. Like, honestly, I know from your perspective, you really not only offer treatment in English and Spanish, but you have found that option to increase access and participation for the community, yes, which is a perspective that we're really looking forward to get more in depth later. So, Bilna, can you please describe Rick's School of Social Work, particularly the MSW program? How many students are enrolled? How many graduates every year? Do you have a sense of the alumni community? And how many are licensed and practice in Rhode Island? And where do the graduates work when they are licensed? It's a lot in this question, but I think it's important for having the workforce understanding of Rhode Island.
So I am from the amazing School of Social Work, the MSW program, and we have some of our students here that are school-based. So I just first want to say thank you to them, and I want to acknowledge our students. So our students, we have enrollment of 200 students. About 100 students graduate a year, and the majority of our students that graduate stay in Rhode Island. So about 80 to 90% of our students, they service Rhode Island in hospitals, outpatient community centers, and our school base as well throughout the state. But I want to acknowledge our students, Justine, Tammy, Rebecca, Leanne, LaShawn, Haiti, Cassie, Chanel, Sierra, Stephanie, and I think I see one more of my students out there. So if I don't see you, I apologize. This is from my early, Mallory. So I want to thank you for being here. So these are the students that are second year placed in the Providence School Department. So from this group of students, the majority of students want to be placed in school base. And just to acknowledge, like everyone has said, it's a crisis. Our students are seeing it every day. They're holding schools and school social workers, psychologists, and counselors. They're holding the schools by a thread. We need to know that part. I think that's essential. And our students are experiencing the same things. They're not only servicing the students, but they are also servicing the staff and the faculty. So we want to acknowledge your work, and I also want to make sure, I know that we don't have everyone here, but I want to acknowledge that right now mental health providers are also struggling and having a hard time, and they're under-resourced and underfunded.
Thank you, Vilna, and especially for providing us the opportunity to get to see the students that are actually doing the work and that we are counting on for the future, and especially because of the need that we have right now. So thank you so much for being here. And with us, we have Amy that really has a perspective on being a school-based clinician. Can you share why you wanted to work in a school and what you heard from your MSW classmates about the career options?
So prior to being, is that working? Yep. Prior to being in a school, I worked in child welfare for the state, and I was drawn to work in the public school system to be more preventative and proactive and be able to touch more students' lives rather than reactionary. And the second part of the question, I'm sorry.
I just want to know what is that you heard from the MSW classmates about the career option.
Sure. So I'm, right now my role is a school social work specialist in Providence. So Vilna and I collaborate a lot on supporting the students in the schools in Providence. We are working together to get them trained in evidence-based practices to be able to provide that structure and support for them to do those interventions with our students. And I think it's been a really positive experience. I love having interns because I'm constantly learning from the students as well and keep up to date on like best practices and things like that. And it's really important for that pipeline and for them to be prepared when they graduate to work in a school, because a school is a very different environment than many other social work placements. So,
Thank you for that perspective. And Vilna, I'm going to go back to you about the biggest barriers that get in the way of students completing the degree and getting licensed as clinical social workers. Can you share with us the perspective of what are the barriers that we have here in Rhode Island?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to acknowledge is that the School of Social Work has done and it's continued to do a really good job at trying to engage representation, which is one of the pieces that the student representative had said. So most of our, I would say probably more than 50% of our students enroll in school-based practice, they are BIPOC students. I think the financial piece is a big element. I think it's important to think about if we want to attract representation and if we want to attract diverse clinicians, we have to be able to meet some of their needs. And so our students are experiencing the same needs that the students in the schools that they're serving. So bringing compensation, grants, scholarships, fellowships that would provide that financial stability for them is super essential. In addition, I think there has to be more resources provided to the school because as we do have a fantastic relationship with the Providence schools, however, their staff they're overworked. Their caseloads are very large. I believe that for Providence, it's about 917 per social worker, which is outrageous. The ideal number is 250, and so we're hoping that whoever's here that can make a change can think about that, because our students then not getting the experience that they obviously get a lot of experience with the crisis intervention, but we would like to see more training, we would like to see more time for them to prepare to be able to transition into those positions.
Great feedback. I think that some of those things have come out with recommendations in policy and legislation. We're working very closely to just make sure that there is resources available to make those barriers stop. And Dr. Sabater, what do you see as the consequence if we don't increase access to treatment, particularly for youth?
The numbers are clear that speak for themselves in terms of, so then this will, of course, increase. And so what we would like to see or avoid would be for those adverse child experiences to become mental disorders. And that's what the goal, because if we intervene, if we do something now while it's happening or before, then we're going to have adults later on that will not have to be treated for trauma. And when I see all ages. So the adults that I see, had something, was done, could have been done earlier, that would have been avoided. So if we don't do something now, that's among other factors and other things, of course, but one of them that we are concentrated on is that, to try to avoid that.
And it's about prevention, right? Like you're trying to say, you participated in the Prepare Rhode Island High School internship program as an employer, engaging high school students in your work and possible careers in your field. Why did you decide to do that, and can you describe how it worked?
So that was an amazing experience for us to be able to have interns from the Prepare RI program. So we decided to do that because one of our priorities is to serve others and serve. So we saw through Skills RI, that's who runs that program, that connection, like a partner that we could get connected to those students. So it was this summer, and we had 3 interns, and they were Cape Verdean and Dominican. I'm a Black Puerto Rican, by the way, and my wife is a Puerto Rican too. So we were excited to be able to bring that opportunity to the students the whole summer. So it's a good program. I mean, they enjoy it, we enjoyed it, but they got to host, or we put the idea, they have a project, and to do something for the community. And we were going to do mental health screenings. So we did 2 days of mental health screenings. Now, the 3 interns, high schools, right, were the ones who ran that program. So they did the logistics. They felt so powerful and empowered that they could do something for the community. Because before we did that project, the first project that we do is to make sure that we embed the ethnic culture and race. So they had to explore that first. What's my culture? What's my race? And I would bring myself as a licensed clinical psychologist, being a Black Puerto Rican, and all the things that I went through. So they each had that opportunity. Then they went ahead and did some research on what does it mean to be a psychologist in Cape Verde. What does it mean to be a psychologist in Pawtucket? So they each had that understanding. And from there, what was their role that they would see themselves doing now and then in the future for their community, and also for the project that we were going to do. And they were shocked and amazed in terms of what they found. I mean, they were coming to say, oh my God, I didn't know that Blacks, we have done a lot for the field of psychology. I didn't know that. And, so they were like, it was an amazing opportunity for them to experience and be connected more with the field of mental health and the need there. So they also talked about the stigma within their cultures and their groups, and also here in Rhode Island, and what they could do. And they saw something, so it was more like mental health issues, like, wow, mental health issues, we could do something about it. And through the internship program, we provided that opportunity. So because we empower and kind of like scaffolding, so we are there with them, so that they had the opportunity. They loved that. It was great. So I just, I get so excited because to be able to do that, and I don't want to be biased, but I wish everyone would become a psychologist, but, at least exposure to the mental health field is good. So it was good.
It's great to hear that experience, especially because you are right. Many of our communities of color, including my own background, mental health is really a taboo. It's not talked about. And please grow up, if you feel in that type of way, it's only sad. Tomorrow you'll feel better. There's no such a thing as depression. And I'll tell you, my own parents do not believe in mental health problems. They say, no, that doesn't exist. Like, what? That didn't exist when I was growing up. So that cultural awareness of, it is a need to be aware that there is a opportunity to learn about, hey, it's okay to feel depressed. And it's okay to look for help. It's not gonna make you weak. It's not gonna make you less than. and it's actually going to provide you with opportunities to feel better and do better their environments. So that's for sure something that I know firsthand. This is the last question to all the panelists, because I think that everybody in this room would agree that we can not only concentrate on increasing the number of licensed clinical social workers and other mental health professionals, but we also have to ensure that the workforce pipeline is diverse. That includes multilingual practitioners with the lived experiences of minimally culturally responsive training to authentically engage diverse communities. And can you all share your perspective on this dynamic? What more needs to be done to attract and retain BIPOC students and ultimately professionals in the field that feel that it's important to be trained culturally? Because it doesn't have to be all BIPOC. We understand that it needs to be diversity, but if we don't have that diversity, how can we make sure that everyone that has the passion to become a practitioner could be culturally responsible to understand the people that are in front of them, that are from diverse communities? So let's start with Amy.
The first thing that comes to mind when you asked about that is a meeting I had with my supervisor, Natalie, earlier this week with the CTE director and creating pathways in high school for our own students to get in the field of mental health, not just social work, but school psychology and school counseling. So that's one initiative that we're going to start to do some work around. So, yes.
Linda?
I would say that we need to start by adding resources to the schools and as well as the programs that service the schools. I think that we really need to look at trauma-informed care and training. Anti-oppressive and anti-racist training would be really helpful in all settings, not just in the colleges where we teach, but also directly in the schools to the staff. I also think that, including pieces of cultural humility and adding those trainings across would decrease the school to prison pipeline, which I think is a problem that definitely exacerbates mental health. But I think if we add all those elements and we really take a deeper look, like I think the person that presented for the school, teachers do need help. They also need training. And in order to shift the culture, we really have to have a conversation about how to go about doing that. We've been conditioned to respond a certain way, and we operate within that structure of racism and oppression. So it takes a lot of work, and it takes a collective effort.
Thank you for your input. And doctor, what are you thinking?
So I'm thinking real quick because so it should be to take an approach that is accessible, equitable, and inclusive to, and it's realistic. So that meets the reality of what's happening in terms even financial. It was mentioned, right? Just to become a licensed psychologist, social worker. By the way, before I forget, maybe some partnership because we would love to have students, at Sabater Lab. So I didn't forget. Good. So so taking that approach would be very good in terms of the money. It's an issue, to have to pay for the license so if we are going to be doing things for BIPOC, then we gotta equity will be full force, right? That means that it's going to probably look to some people that we're handing things, we're not handing things, we're making things right? So taking those barriers might make this field more enticing to have BIPOC people and other culture, Latinos, bilinguals, all to the field, right? And because it's needed. There's a need, right? It's not a secret. There is a need, and we would love to be part of that. We love to help, and we love training. Again, my wife, Ibelis Sabater, she's over here somewhere. We both of us are very into sharing what we know, the knowledge, and making sure that people are supported so that they could join the field. So.
Thank you. And it's a family commitment. To their credit, they created a foundation to make sure that they reach out to schools and kids in the underserved communities that do not have access to education about mental health, and they bring them to the foundation with little resources and provide them all the support. So thank you for the work that you're doing already in Rhode Island for this. And I will be remiss without acknowledging Senator DeMario, which is a mental health professional that understands also the environment and the struggles and the barriers that are here. So Senator DeMario, thank you for your knowledge and always feedback for us to create a better Rhode Island with policies that really are meaningful with this professional. Let's give them a round of applause. Amazing professionals that really provide us feedback that for us to take back. But I want to open for a couple of questions, and then we're going to then close because we want to be respectful of your time. Any questions? Yes. Absolutely.
In Providence, we have 24 school psychologists for 24,000 students. At the high school level, it's 1 to 1,200 across our 10 schools. But we do have a diverse population of school psychs who want to provide services during the summer outside of the community that are not able to because of that. So that was just one barrier I wanted to bring up. And then we only have one program here at Rick. URI's program was shut down, which was the only PhD program. And Rick graduated, I think you said you graduated like 200 students?
100 every year.
100. So
We
they
enroll
graduate
200.
15, and most of them go out of state.
Wow.
So there's a lot of areas for support. And November 7th to 11th is School Psychology Awareness Week.
Awesome. Thank you for your feedback. I think it's important for us to take back, and I know that we have some legislation to provide some later way for schools to be able to bill Medicare for those reimbursements because we leave in money in the table. And then so we'll work more with your recommendation, and I really appreciate that. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, Darlene.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? No. I basically also to the point that you graduate 100 MSWs a year, and as we heard, we need many master's level counselors, master's level social workers, LMHCs. We do have more diverse staff in our bachelor's level programs across the community. So I'm just thinking we also need to really invest at Rhode Island College and our other state colleges around a pathway program that we can work with the community-based agencies and really get, streamline a new program to help some of the people who are already dedicated to our kids across the state that could just use a little bit more education and a little wraparound support, work with the community-based agencies. We want to keep them. We want to help them move up. We want to work with the schools. So it wasn't really a question. It was more of like a suggestion that, a little recommendation. But yeah, thank you.
Very welcome suggestion. And I think it's about support, retention, and making sure that we keep our talent in Rhode Island. Any other question? If not, I'm ready to do closing remarks.
Can I just add
Yes,
one
Eileen.
thing? Yeah. A lot of what you guys have heard tonight around these initiatives are funded through grants. And so to be able to figure out ways to create sustainability with a lot of this work is super important. As well as, like Natalie touched on, the ratios, so that way when the students are in our schools, they're getting the best experience that they can, and we're practicing across all of the areas that we are able to, because right now we're in crisis mode most of the time. And then really creating the systems to support that, because any school social worker will tell you if the principal or the admin is not on board with the initiatives that are happening, then it will not be successful. So that's it.
I agree 100%. And I just want to acknowledge that this summit, the 10th annual summit, wouldn't be possible without the support of our amazing staff in the Rhode Island Senate. So let's acknowledge Nora Crowley, that has been around here and there. for organizing this event, for making sure that she did the outreach and help us throughout this time, but also her staff and taking a team. You've seen this gentleman here from Capital TV team. Thank you so much for the work that you guys do. Our communication team, Greg Pear and Daniel are here as well, so thank you for everything you guys do. At the beginning of our summit, we have Nisi Kadir, which is my administrator assistant that was here, welcome you, so thank you to Nisi. And overall, thank you to Jake and the leadership of the Senate President and new leadership team. Thank you for being supportive of this important summit year over year, and we'll continue to add more of these. So expect next year's request, Senate President. Thank you. All right, so that closes out this year's Senate Education Summit. Thank you to all of our presenters and panelists. You guys were all amazing, and thank you to all of you for being here and engaging in this work. We have a lot of work ahead, and I know I speak for my colleagues in the Senate when I emphasize how important your input is in the legislative process. So please stay in touch in the months ahead so we can collectively find solutions to the critical challenges that surface today. Lastly, I want to just remind you about the legislative process. We start session January 2nd, and it goes very quick until we need to really introduce some bills, and recommendations need to be done early on. So make sure you partner with your legislators, but don't wait until the last minute because there is deadlines that we need to have. So I just wanted to make that reminder over there. We don't want to get our Senate President upset that all these bills are coming last minute. So we want to make sure we do the proactive work. With that, I just want to say gracias, thank you, and thank you to Rick for hosting us today. Have a great evening, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you.